What's up, everybody? Welcome to The Checkout. It's a podcast that hopefully you have subscribed to. Have you now? Have you also subscribed to Jazz United? That's our other podcast produced at WBGO Studios, and all of them can be found on our homepage at wbgo.org. On today's show, we're not only joining Nate Chinen from Jazz United, but we're also joining another podcast in the realm of jazz that you should be aware of called A Noise from the Deep, hosted by the one and only trumpeter and composer Dave Douglas. In this episode, Dave's going to take a back seat to make way for our editorial director, Nate Chinen, who's going to lead this conversation featuring Dave Douglas, along with his friend, the legendary saxophonist Joe Lovano. They have a new recording together. It's called Soundprints Other Worlds. They've been making music with this specific band for almost a decade now. It was initially spawned by the duo's desire to pay homage to their saxophone hero, the composer Wayne Shorter. In short, they wanted to lift up Shorter's legacy by channeling his fearless and inventive spirit with their own original compositions, and having a band to be a launching pad for those ideas. And that band features three other phenomenal artists, including the pianist Lawrence Fields, the bassist Linda Mahan-O, and the drummer Joey Barron. Linda is the only one that couldn't join us for this conversation, which we're about to bring you, but we have one more note. The music you're hearing now is now available on Greenleaf Music, so you need to go there and check it out and support independent artists. Or better yet, just head on down to New York City's Birdland to see the band perform beginning tonight. That's November 30th for the next 4 nights. Now on with the show.
The defining trait of Soundprints is the tangled crosstalk of its front line, an urbane, off-the-fly counterpoint brimming with crooked urgency, like a choice bit of dialogue in a David Mamet play. In this case, the sparring partners are the saxophonist Joe Lovano and the trumpeter Dave Douglas, who share leadership of the band and compose all of its music. Going through this album, I was reminded of how much more, since 2012, this thing has become organically a holistic thing. Like, I don't think of it anymore as a front line and a rhythm section, because the way that Lawrence and Joey and Linda are playing, like, it's really fully integrated and totally organic. Do you feel like there's been that evolution too?
I think the compositions and everything have been developing through the years. The focal point the whole time has been to share the space and to create some music within the music together. When you first heard us, I think we had just come back from a tour. We might have toured once in Europe prior to that, where we really put some music together where we could, like, the pieces that I brought in were like springboards into some improvisations. And that conception has stayed with the band, in the way that I've been trying to write for the group. Dave's compositions have such different shapes, and there's all these different moods that we try to sustain, throughout each piece.
So much about personalities and just the conversation. And I think Joe and I both write for this band, really in particular, to set up that kind of dialogue, to set up those kind of situations in different ways. Joe would probably agree with me that we write differently for this band than we would for other projects that we do. There's a sensibility of the initial inspiration of Wayne Shorter and his music and life and philosophy, but then it's also gone deeper into the relationship between the five of us and the different things that we can bring to the stage that might create some new sorts of platforms that you might not have heard before. we're always sort of looking for a new way to contextualize where this music is coming from and how to do that. And so much of that is about personalities. I think that without Joey, without Lawrence, without Linda, it just wouldn't be at all what it is. They're all integrated right into the writing and the very conception of what we do when we go on stage.
As we talk about the compositions as springboards, there was a moment when our friend Jim Mackney commented on the beginning of Sky Miles. Dave, you chimed in and said that this tune actually was kind of pivotal in terms of the conception of this album. Could you talk about that?
Sure. We Joe and I, with each record, and this is our third one, there's sort of a different approach that we take. We want them to each one have a distinct personality. And so when we began talking about this one that became Other Worlds with this beautiful artwork from Dave Chisholm, it was a matter of months of us going back and forth, thinking of different themes and different ways to approach it and different ideas about what the repertoire could be. One day he called me and he said, I have this tune that I wrote and it's called Sky Miles. And just something about the way you said it, Joe, I was just like, oh, okay, now I know what we're doing. Space Exploration is another one of Joe's tunes, but it just set the tone for me in terms of putting this music in a space, in outer space. Yeah. And so it was when he came forward with that title and the concept for the tune that the rest of it sort of came together, at least in my imagination.
We just heard Space Exploration from Soundprints. That's Dave Douglas with Joe Lovano and the other three members, Lawrence Field, Linda Mahano, Joey Barron, celebrating their new Greenleaf recording and celebrating the great Wayne Shorter, but also not exclusively. As you'll hear, the band gives a nod to another source of inspiration, the experimental quintet with a fiery frontline trumpet and saxophone in the Art Ensemble of Chicago. They even riff on the quintet's tagline, Ancient to the Future. WBGO's Nate Chinen continues with the pianist Lawrence Fields and drummer Joey Barron.
I want to throw a question to Lawrence because there's, as Dave alluded to just now, there's a lot of push-pull in the interaction of the band on this album, and there are moments when you couldn't be more locked into a swinging groove, and then there are moments when it pulls apart and abstracts, and you feel like you're sort of in outer space. And so many of those moments, I hear you like flowing. Whether you're flowing out or you're like locking in, I just hear your interaction in the band as so central to like all of that dynamic exchange. And so I wonder what your perspective is on that. I don't want to talk about inside versus outside, because we know that binary does not exist in this band. So I just want to talk about the dynamic exchange.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could probably say it doesn't exist in space, right? If you're in outer space, that's just where you are. There's no inside, there's no outside. But that is actually one of the things that I've enjoyed since the very start of this band, and still enjoy every time we play. Is the fact that not only are there a lot of things that are not really clearly delineated and they're just left up to trust, but also it is one of the most unpredictable and fun musical experiences every time we play, because you never know what's gonna happen. Still, to this day, as many times as we played, when we start a tune, even if we played the tune 50 times before, it may come out completely differently than the last time we played it. In the last night, the last week, the last month. We can start a tune, Joe gets an idea, he goes a completely different direction, or Dave goes a different direction, or Joey plays a completely different beat, and there are all these wonderful things that can happen every night, and a lot of it is completely in the moment.
it's a real listening experience, man. Like, especially like, when you're in an intimate space like the Vanguard, where we're really just right with each other, which felt like that in the studio also, you're breathing together and you're really listening, and it's so fun to experience that. This quintet has a lot of magic that happens.
Yeah.
Even when we just do a sound check, there's sparks that happen in sound checks that carry over into the set.
This album was recorded pre-COVID, right?
Well, yeah, we played a week at the Vanguard January 2020, and the following week went in the studio.
So yeah, just under the wire. I've got a question for Joey, because as we talk about these relationships, like Lawrence said, and all the different, permutations of that, Joey, you've got separate history playing with Joe and with Dave, and in lots of different bands, including the Stargazer tribute that Dave did to Wayne Shorter back in the '90s, and in trios with Joe and in larger groups with Joe. And so I want to ask you about your perspective when it's this combination of people. Like, is there something that feels different to you playing with these two gentlemen together, playing this music? What perspective do you have there?
I'm just incredibly happy to be a part of this team, because I tend not to throw anything away. Like I met Joe in the 70s when we were fooling around and trying to figure out where one was at Berkeley. And I met Dave in New York was that the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah. When I said I don't throw anything away, I mean, I have those hours logged in my my body of all the times that we've ever played. And that's a part of whenever I play, and especially in this band. I don't try to play what I did in 80, because that's asinine. I'm just so incredibly thrilled to be a part of this team that provides a context to be able to take what happened previously and think freely with it and apply it to the moment and see what happens and how that can keep moving forward.
I don't want to forget, because our very first comment on YouTube, as we were just getting started, actually before we even started the stream, was from someone named Taylor Hatch. And he had a question in two parts. Which track was the most fun to record? And which song was the most challenging to finish? I think those are probably two different answers, but I wonder what you all have to say to that.
I wouldn't be able to break it down that way. Especially with this band, the whole thing is of a piece. It's all just one big piece of music that we're going to make. And so I wouldn't be able to approach any of the pieces differently. Like, it's all just part of one flow. And one special thing about this record, most of the pieces are first take. So it wasn't like there were tunes that we struggled with. I mean, we did multiple takes of a couple of them, but they're mostly just first takes. The music played itself. Not really knowing what's going to happen is a key part of it. And Joe and I have talked about this, that like, for example, when we do a week at the Vanguard, the order of the tunes is different every set, every night. Because the tunes bump up against each other differently, it helps us discover different aspects of what could be inside there, different ways things could happen.
My piece, The Flight, it's like a specific kind of groove that Joey and Lawrence and Linda play that part like incredible. And it's that was really challenging for me. That was like a piece that was really like there was a lot more specific things that were happening in it, you know, in the whole feeling of it and the rhythm and the form with these 13-bar phrases and 5-bar moment with just drums. That was fun and really challenging for me.
That tune is it reminds me of like someone walking down the street with a really hip walk, you know. Because it's grooving, but it's grooving in kind of it's got a character to the lope, you know. I love the way that that vamp you've set up for the rhythm section lays against the melodic line. It's really, really cool.
That felt really great, man. And downbeats and offbeats.
Also, we almost never count off the tunes. We begin with an improvisation and then find our way into the tunes. And I think that forces us to develop a more organic relationship with the material itself.
I love that idea of not counting off and kind of arriving at a consensus, you know, in the moment. And it reminds me, you know, there's one of your compositions on this album is titled Antiquity to Outer Space, which of course reminds me of Ancient to the Future.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was intentional.
It's just a fancy way of saying it, Nate.
Yeah. Can you talk about that sort of like the experimental tradition as it's expressed in this band? Because it's so you know, really on every song, but in, you know, to varying degrees, you're really like completely free.
In writing that particular piece, I mean, it was definitely coming from our overall theme. And I've been doing a lot of reading about ancient history, hence titles like Pythagoras. And I've been thinking about how the dawn of science connects with what's happening here now. And that is what the title refers to. And I think that's part of the overall theme of what we're thinking about is tying ancient to the future, antiquity to outer space. That particular song, there's a progression of events. It starts out very, very simply with very simple intervals, and the intervals start getting more complicated and the rhythms start getting more complicated, and the excitement of the underlying motion in the rhythm section. That's what I was thinking about when I wrote it, like starting someplace simple. And then as a launching pad.
speaking of the flight and space exploration, who in this band, and maybe it's more than one person, is like the big space enthusiast?
Oh,
Lawrence.
who is it?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when I was in maybe first grade, I think, I used to go to the library and just kind of pick up whatever looked interesting. And so, or maybe second grade. Yeah, maybe second grade. I would just go through the shelves and kind of take books out. And one day I came across a book about NASA. I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I had kind of heard of, like science fiction and Star Trek and things like that. And I wasn't aware that there was a place that you could go to actually kind of be connected to learn about what was going on. And so I was in second grade and I read the book and I looked through it and I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I told my parents, I want to go. But you can't go to space camp in second grade. You have to wait until you're in fifth grade, They don't want to be babysitting, you have to be old enough to kind of look after yourself. And so I waited every year from when I was in second grade until I was in fifth grade. And we had an opportunity to go. And I ended up going to space camp and going through some of the training, like eating some of the astronaut food, going into the cockpit simulator, and we ran a simulated shuttle mission and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, ever since then, I've been enchanted with anything to do with space exploration, space travel, things like that. Even recently, yesterday, I just watched for the first time the SpaceX Starship go up and land.
What do you make of the sort of privatization of space travel? Like, what are your feelings about that? That's happening right now, as you say.
All I can say is I hope those folks out there like music.
I have a cousin-in-law that works on the whole Mars mission right now.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole world, man, that is so beautiful to realize, Wow.
When we did a couple of projects where we were opening for Wayne's quartet, and we were around Wayne, and then he wrote those pieces for us for the first record that we made. And at the time, he had just been inducted into the Planetary Society, I think by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And so it was something that he was talking about a lot. And the titles of the pieces he wrote for us were both from Robert Heinlein novels, so very science fiction related, and just looking at his scores, they're like beautiful pieces of art. So I think that was a big inspiration for us with this band right from the beginning. And it just seemed like, okay, now we're doing this record where Joe and I are going to write all the music. Let's, bring that vision into what the thing is about. Having the album on Greenleaf Music, an independent company, is also really important for me. I think that it, we're able to just say the thing exactly the way we want to say it and let the music play out the way we want to. And I think for independent labels, Bandcamp as a platform has been so important. I didn't intend to go quite so rah-rah on the business side, but there you have it. It is, asking about space exploration and this concept of other worlds, being in this independent musical ecosystem these days, I think is also, it's a part of that vision of how we make the music together, with complete freedom.
When we talk about how artists are surviving in this moment, sustainability is an important question. And having this album on Greenleaf, there's more than one kind of sustainability that is being supported there. So yes, I will say it again, echoing Dave's thought, and you should definitely purchase it from Greenleaf Music. Please support the musicians, support the label. And thank you so much for joining us, joining WBGO in this special event. This has been a really excellent hang. We're all in different spots, but it really did feel like a hang. So thank you all.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nate. Thank
Yes,
you.
Nate.
Thank you.
Pythagoras, Joe Lovano, and Dave Douglas from Soundprints. And you can find the album on Bandcamp. Support independent artists, support Greenleaf Music, and subscribe to Dave Douglas's podcast, A Noise from the Deep. And definitely check out Soundprints, kicking off their run at New York City's Birdland Jazz Club in New York City, beginning November 30th, 4 nights. And make sure to follow all of these artists. They all have their own social media followings. On Twitter and on Facebook, you can find my handle at checkoutjazz. You can also hit me up on Instagram. And make sure to subscribe again to the other podcasts, Jazz United, hosted by WBGO's Nate Chinen and Greg Bryant. And of course, check out Greenleaf Music's podcast, A Noise from the Deep, hosted by Dave Douglas. The Checkout is a production of WBGO Studios. I'm Simon Rentner. Thanks for checking us out.